The LAPD was firing point blank, but the bullets were just bouncing off. Two men were walking out of a North Hollywood bank, not looking for an escape, but looking for a war. And they had the one weapon the police couldn't stop. Outside, Los Angeles Police Department officers arrive on the scene within minutes. They are armed with 9mm Beretta pistols and 12-gauge shotguns. The officers pull their triggers. The robbers respond with a wall of 7.62 by 39mm steel. In a desperate race against time, officers abandoned their posts to raid a nearby gun store for the only thing that could save them, the AR-15 patrol rifle. This 44-minute bloodbath didn't just change the LAPD, it rearmed every officer in America. But the solution wasn't just about raw firepower, it was about a design choice made decades earlier that almost got the rifle banned from the military entirely. Before this morning, the police were bringing revolvers to a machine gun fight. The containment strategy was about to fail in the most violent way possible. If a situation escalated beyond a routine traffic stop, the standard procedure was simple. You held the line, established a perimeter, and waited for the specialized SWAT teams to arrive. This worked in an era of low-level street crime, but the late 20th century brought a new, more lethal breed of threat. Highly mobile, heavily armed, and often chemically altered suspects began appearing on city streets with increasing frequency. These were individuals who didn't fear the badge, and certainly didn't fear the standard-issue service weapon. The police were operating with 1950s technology against 21st-century aggression. The technological gap was most apparent in the ballistics of the day. The standard-issue 9mm round lacked the velocity to penetrate even basic soft body armor worn by modern criminals.
If a suspect put on a Kevlar vest, the patrol officer was effectively neutralized. The shotgun, while devastating at close range, was a liability in a crowded urban environment. The wide pellet spread made it impossible to use in a hostage situation or a busy street without risking collateral damage. The police were trapped in a tactical void between a pistol that was too weak and a shotgun that was too imprecise. They needed a tool that was as precise as a surgeon's scalpel, but as powerful as a sledgehammer. The search for new weapons led the departments to military warehouses, but this path was almost blocked by the officials themselves. The police chiefs were terrified of being accused of militarization, unaware that they would soon have no choice. While the debate in the offices was about whether the rifle would change the image of the patrolman, the reality on the streets was already dictating its terms. The massacre in North Hollywood was just the first link in a chain of events that would forever bury the era of revolvers. The AR-15, which was still a controversial weapon, the AR-15 did not begin its life in a police armory or on a designer's drafting board at a major defense conglomerate. It was born in a small aviation hangar in Hollywood, California. Eugene Stoner, the chief engineer at Armalite, was not a traditional gunsmith. He was an aerospace visionary who viewed the rifle not as a piece of iron and wood, but as a high-performance machine. In the late 1950s, the infantry rifle was a heavy, clunky relic of the World War II era. Stoner decided to discard a century of tradition, opting instead for materials usually reserved for the wings of fighter jets. By utilizing 7075-T6 aluminum and high-impact synthetic polymers, he created a weapon that felt like a toy to the old guard, but functioned with the precision of a Swiss watch. This radical engineering was centered on a concept known as the direct impingement gas system.
In a standard rifle like the AK-47, a heavy steel piston moves back and forth to cycle the action, creating a rhythmic shifting of weight that throws off the shooter's aim. Stoner's design eliminated the piston entirely. He redirected the high-pressure gases from the fired cartridge through a thin tube directly into the bolt carrier group. This meant the internal components were the only things moving in a straight line back toward the shooter's shoulder. The result was a weapon with almost zero muzzle climb and a recoil impulse so soft that even a novice could keep rounds on target during rapid fire. This mechanical simplicity would later become the primary reason the patrol carbine training programs in police academies became so successful across the country. However, the most controversial aspect of Stoner's engineering was the choice of caliber. The 5.56 by 45 millimeter round was a tiny projectile compared to the massive 30-06 rounds used by the previous generation. Military traditionalists mocked the small cartridge, claiming it lacked the kinetic energy to stop a determined adversary. Stoner countered with the laws of physics, specifically the principle of hydrostatic shock, by launching a small, lightweight bullet at speeds exceeding 3,000 feet per second. The round achieved a devastating effect upon impact. Instead of simply passing through a target, the high-velocity bullet would fragment or tumble, creating a massive temporary wound cavity. This engineering choice meant that a law enforcement firearms platform could finally provide the stopping power of a much heavier weapon while remaining light enough for an officer to carry for an entire 12-hour shift. The modularity of the AR-15 platform was the final stroke of genius that cemented its place in the history of police rifles in America. Stoner designed the rifle to be split into two main components, the upper and lower receivers. This allowed for an unprecedented level of customization. If a department needed a short-barreled version for tight urban environments, or a longer, more accurate version for rural deputies, they didn't need to buy a different gun. They simply swapped the upper receiver. This Lego-like architecture meant the AR-15 could evolve alongside the ever-changing demands of active shooter response gear. It was a future-proof design that made every other competitor, from the rugged Ruger Mini 14 to the heavy M14, look like a prehistoric fossil in the eyes of tactical procurement officers. The transition from a laboratory experiment to a standard-issue police carbine was not immediate, but the engineering foundation was undeniable. Stoner had created a weapon that was significantly more ergonomic than anything that had come before it. The pistol grip, the thumb-operated safety, and the centrally located magazine release were all designed for high-stress environments where fine motor skills vanish. This human-centric design is what eventually allowed the AR-15 to bridge the gap between a specialized SWAT tool and a universal patrol rifle. It was a masterpiece of aerospace engineering disguised as a firearm, waiting for the right moment to disrupt the entire landscape of American law enforcement. But before it could dominate the streets, it had to survive a corporate war that would nearly bankrupt its creators. The transition from the battlefield to the patrol car was not a stroke of luck. It was a calculated masterclass in corporate disruption and aggressive market expansion. As the military shifted its primary focus toward the M16A2, the industry was suddenly flooded with a massive surplus of older Colt SP1 rifles and specialized components. Manufacturers like Colt and Bushmaster realized that the civilian and police markets represented a literal gold mine if they could frame the weapon correctly. They stopped marketing the weapon as a mere tool of war and began selling the patrol rifle concept.
This was a strategic rebranding designed to convince city councils and police chiefs that the AR-15 was the modern sporting rifle for the public and the ultimate tactical solution for the thin blue line. These companies didn't wait for orders to arrive in the mail. They actively pursued federal grants to ensure that even tiny rural areas could purchase military-grade equipment at a fraction of the cost. Aggressive price competition drove out competitors, while free training for gunsmiths removed the last technical barriers. The transition of police forces to the AR-15 became not a choice, but an inevitability. By the early 2000s, this rifle had become the industry standard, surpassing the legendary Ruger Mini 14 due to its modularity and strong corporate support. The marketing genius behind the AR-15 focused heavily on its role in the evolution of police equipment. Sales representatives emphasized that the rifle was a liability reduction tool. They argued that a rifle was actually safer for urban environments than the traditional shotgun because it offered superior accuracy and reduced the risk of stray projectiles hitting bystanders. This narrative was reinforced by the rise of active shooter response gear requirements in the wake of high-profile tragedies. Police departments across the country began to view the patrol carbine training as a mandatory survival skill. The weapon was no longer seen as an aggressive escalation of force, but as a necessary response to a world where criminals were increasingly better armed and more mobile than the authorities. This corporate warfare extended into the very architecture of the rifle itself. Manufacturers leaned into the modularity of the platform, creating an ecosystem where a single lower receiver could be customized with endless accessories. This created a recurring revenue stream through the sale of optics, lights, and specialized rail systems. A police department could buy a basic rifle and then spend years upgrading it with the latest tactical rifle for officers. This adaptability made it impossible for other firearms to compete. While a revolver or a shotgun was a static piece of technology, the AR-15 was a living platform that could evolve alongside the threat. It was this combination of aggressive lobbying, clever rebranding, and a superior business model that cemented the AR-15's dominance in the history of police rifles in America. The success of the AR-15 also relied on a psychological shift within law enforcement leadership. Manufacturers successfully argued that the difference between patrol rifle and shotgun usage was the difference between a blunt instrument and a precision tool. They marketed the 5.56 millimeter round as the professional choice for the modern era. This led to a massive wave of police service rifle procurement contracts that standardized the training across state lines. The result was a unified tactical front where an officer from California could pick up a rifle in New York and understand its manual of arms perfectly. This level of standardization was something the American law enforcement firearms market had never seen before. It turned a controversial aerospace experiment into the most ubiquitous tool in the history of American policing. The dominance of the AR-15 was also bolstered by its presence in popular culture, which created a feedback loop that influenced procurement. As the public and the police saw the rifle being used by elite units in televised high-stakes encounters, the demand for the platform skyrocketed. Manufacturers capitalized on this by releasing law enforcement-only models that featured specific enhancements like shorter barrels and specialized finishes. These LE models became status symbols within departments, further entrenching the rifle as the definitive choice for the modern officer. Every other manufacturer was forced to either adopt the AR-15 pattern or face total irrelevance in the domestic market. The corporate war was over, and Eugene Stoner's invention had won a total, uncontested victory. Yet as the rifle became the backbone of every patrol car in the country, a dormant mechanical secret from its past threatened to undermine its reputation in the field. The transition from corporate dominance to the cold reality of the street happened with startling speed. As the AR-15 became the standard-issue police carbine, it faced its true test in the unpredictable theater of urban operations. This was no longer about sales figures or marketing brochures. It was about how the weapon performed when a patrol officer's adrenaline was redlining and lives hung in the balance. The rifle proved to be more than just a firearm. It was a force multiplier that fundamentally altered the physics of a gunfight. Unlike the heavy, recoiling shotguns of the past, the AR-15 offered a level of control that allowed officers to stay on target through multiple rounds. This mechanical stability was the difference between ending a threat and losing control of a chaotic scene. The tactical rifle for officers redefined the concept of the perimeter. In the era of the revolver, a suspect at 50 yards was effectively out of reach for the average patrolman. The AR-15 erased that distance. During high-stakes active shooter response gear deployments, the platform's sub-MOA precision allowed law enforcement to engage with surgical accuracy from distances that were previously the sole domain of specialized SWAT snipers. This capability saved lives by allowing first responders to neutralize threats before they could close the distance to innocent bystanders. The rifle didn't just provide more power, it provided more time and more space, the two most precious commodities in any tactical crisis. The technical superiority of the new training programs became apparent. Where a .22 caliber bullet or an expanding .38 caliber bullet failed to penetrate obstacles, the .50 caliber bullet worked differently. When it collided with glass or masonry, the bullet fragmented instantly, minimizing the risk of a stray bullet piercing through 3 adjacent buildings. This ballistic paradox, high velocity with low mass, ultimately contributed to the safety of urban environments. Laboratory tests confirmed this definitively, although it took years for society to accept this argument. Furthermore, the ergonomics of the platform became a crucial factor in the history of police rifles in America. In a profession where officers come in all physical sizes, the adjustable stocks and modular grips of the AR-15 meant the weapon could be tailored to the individual. A 5'4" rookie could operate the same rifle as a 6'5" veteran with equal proficiency. This universality ensured that every member of a squad was equally capable of responding to a lethal threat. The rifle became an extension of the officer, its controls positioned so intuitively that they could be operated in total darkness or under the crushing weight of a life-or-death struggle. The shift in police equipment evolution eventually culminated in a new doctrine of immediate intervention. No longer would patrol officers wait for the arrival of armored vans and heavy weapons teams while a crisis unfolded. With a patrol rifle secured in a locking rack between the front seats, every cruiser was now a rapid response unit. This shift was most evident during the San Bernardino terror attack and subsequent high-intensity manhunts, where the AR-15 allowed standard patrol units to maintain a suppressive and accurate firebase against heavily armed suspects. The weapon had successfully transitioned from a controversial military experiment to the most trusted tool in the law enforcement arsenal. However, the rapid adoption of such a sophisticated machine brought with it a set of demands that many departments were unprepared to meet.
The AR-15 is a high-performance instrument, and like a Formula One car, it requires a level of care and understanding that the old pump-action shotguns never did. As these rifles moved from the climate-controlled racks of the armory to the vibration, dust, and temperature swings of a patrol car trunk, the mechanical ghosts of the 1960s began to stir. The very engineering that made the rifle so light and accurate also made it vulnerable to a specific catastrophic type of neglect that was about to be exposed. The transition from the wooden stocks of the past to the polymer and aluminum AR-15 was not merely a change in hardware, it was a fundamental shift in the mechanical relationship between the officer and their tool. The direct impingement system, while elegant in its simplicity, carries a genetic defect that dates back to the jungles of Southeast Asia. When Eugene Stoner designed the rifle, he envisioned a clean-burning system where gas was diverted from the barrel into the heart of the bolt carrier. But this design choice created a closed-loop system where the weapon effectively breathes its own exhaust. In the controlled environment of a shooting range, this is a non-issue. In the unpredictable reality of modern law enforcement firearms maintenance, it can become a lethal liability. During the initial deployment of the M16, the military's decision to use ball powder instead of the specified stick powder turned the AR-15 into a carbon-clogged nightmare. Today, while ammunition quality has drastically improved, the fundamental physical reality remains. The AR-15 shits where it eats. Every time a patrol carbine is fired, hot gases and carbon particulate are blasted directly into the moving parts of the action.
This creates a thick, abrasive sludge that can seize the bolt carrier group in a matter of seconds if the rifle is not properly lubricated. For an officer who leaves their rifle in a trunk for 6 months without inspection, the tactical rifle for officers becomes a ticking clock. The lubrication evaporates, the carbon hardens, and the weapon that was designed for surgical precision becomes a single-shot bolt action at the moment it is needed most. The history of police rifles in America is full of cases where a technical failure turned out to be a failure of institutional memory. Departments mistakenly saw the AR-15 as a buy-and-forget tool, comparing it to the indestructible revolvers of the 1970s out of habit. However, this rifle is a delicate mechanism that requires strict regulations. The same problem with the extraction of the cartridge case, which almost led to its removal from the Army's arsenal, has not gone away. In the heat of a firefight, an officer simply does not have time to fix a complex issue. This vulnerability led to a complete overhaul of patrol training, shifting the focus from accuracy to a deep understanding of the internal physics of weapons. This maintenance burden reveals the true double-edged sword of Stoner's masterpiece. The very lack of a heavy gas piston, the feature that makes the rifle so light and easy to point, is the same feature that makes it vulnerable to fouling. While the AK-47 uses a massive piston to punch through dirt and grit, the AR-15 relies on tight tolerances and thin films of oil to function. This trade-off was the secret behind the early battlefield disasters, and it remains the primary concern for armorers managing a standard-issue police carbine fleet. If the oil runs dry, the friction increases exponentially, leading to a short stroke, where the bolt fails to cycle completely. It is a fragile balance between weight and reliability that requires constant human intervention to maintain.
Beyond the mechanical issues, the AR-15 has faced a political and social scrutiny that no other police service rifle has ever endured. The militarization of the police is a debate often centered on the silhouette of this specific rifle. Its appearance, derived from the battlefield,
creates a psychological barrier between the public and the police equipment evolution. Yet, for the officer on the street, the choice is driven by the cold calculus of survival. They are aware of the failure to extract history and the carbon fouling scandals of the 60s, but they accept the maintenance burden in exchange for the rifle's unmatched accuracy. The fatal compromise isn't just about a dirty gas tube. It's about the heavy responsibility of carrying a weapon that is as temperamental as it is effective. The legacy of the AR-15 is defined by this constant tension between aerospace engineering and the grit of the real world. It is a weapon that demands respect not just from those downrange, but from the person carrying it. As departments across the country continue to refine their active shooter response gear, the lessons of the past serve as a stern reminder. The AR-15 is a precision instrument that can fail in spectacular fashion if its history is ignored.
This mechanical vulnerability has shaped the modern training doctrine, ensuring that the next generation of officers understands the machine as well as they understand the mission. But as technology moves forward, the question remains whether a more robust system will eventually take its place. The legacy of the AR-15 in the American Police Service rifle category is not merely a story of ballistics, but a story of total cultural and tactical dominance. It has become the definitive tool of the modern era, outlasting its critics and evolving past its early mechanical growing pains. Today, the patrol carbine training programs implemented in major cities and rural counties alike are built entirely around the ergonomics of this single platform. It has effectively retired the concept of the general-purpose shotgun, relegating the 12-gauge to specialized roles like breaching or less lethal deployments. The AR-15 did not just fill a gap in the inventory. It fundamentally rewrote the manual on how law enforcement firearms are integrated into daily public safety operations. When we look at the history of police rifles in America, the shift toward the AR-15 represents the most significant equipment transition since the move from the revolver to the semi-automatic pistol. This evolution was driven by a harsh reality. The threats faced by officers became more sophisticated, necessitating a weapon that offered both high capacity and extreme precision. The standard-issue police carbine of today allows a single officer to maintain a perimeter that would have previously required a full tactical team. This shift in the police equipment evolution has created a new baseline for what is expected during a crisis.
The rifle is no longer a hidden luxury locked in a supervisor's trunk. It is a primary life-saving instrument carried in the front seat of every cruiser. The architectural modularity of the AR-15 ensures that it will remain the centerpiece of active shooter response gear for the foreseeable future. Because the rifle is designed as a split receiver system, it can be endlessly adapted to meet the specific needs of a department. A small town officer might carry a 16-inch barrel optimized for long-range accuracy across open fields, while an urban officer utilizes a short-barreled variant for clearing tight stairwells. This versatility is why police carry AR-15 over any other platform. It is a chameleon of the tactical world, capable of being a long-range marksman tool one moment and a close-quarters defensive weapon the next, all while using the same familiar controls. However, the true impact of the AR-15 is found in the psychological shift it forced within the ranks of law enforcement. The difference between patrol rifle and shotgun usage is not just about the number of projectiles, but about the accountability of every round fired. The precision of the 5.56 caliber
allows for a level of target discrimination that was previously impossible in high-stress environments. This technical rifle for officers has turned the average patrolman into a more capable, more confident first responder. It provides the means to end a threat quickly and decisively, which is the ultimate goal in any life-threatening encounter. The weapon has become a symbol of the professionalization of the force, moving away from the scattergun approach of the past toward a doctrine of surgical intervention. As we analyze the global influence of this design, it is clear that Eugene Stoner's aerospace-inspired experiment changed more than just the American landscape. Modern police forces across the globe have looked to the United States and adopted similar lightweight, modular carbines to modernize their own arsenals. The AR-15 proved that high-velocity physics and ergonomic efficiency are the keys to winning the modern firefight. While the platform will continue to see incremental improvements in coatings and gas systems, its core DNA remains untouched. It is a masterpiece of 20th century engineering that has successfully navigated the complexities of the 21st century, proving its worth in the most unforgiving environments imaginable. Ultimately, the AR-15 stands as a testament to the fact that in the world of tactical technology, adaptability is the greatest survival trait.
It survived a disastrous debut in the jungles of Southeast Asia to become the most trusted tool in the hands of those who walk the thin blue line. The debate over its presence in society will likely continue for decades, but its functional superiority on the front line is a matter of settled history. The era of the wood-stocked shotgun and the heavy steel revolver has passed, replaced by the matte black finish of the modern patrol rifle. It is the new standard, the new baseline, and the new protector. The evolution of weaponry never truly stops, but occasionally a design emerges that is so effective it defines an entire century. The AR-15 is that design. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand the engineering that defines the modern world, make sure to subscribe and join us as we continue to tear down the mechanics of history. The next evolution of the tactical landscape is already beginning, and we will be there to document every bolt, spring, and caliber change. The mission continues, and so does the technology that supports it. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we will see you in the next Chronicle.